Thank you so much for the introduction, Carlos, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for all your teaching and guidance because I would have not been here today without all your help with writing for me. My last have not been as good. And so, I'll just start out by saying a bit of my experience as far as music and nature goes together. And it's funny that Carlos actually just mentioned this about the Moonlight Sonata, because I remember last year I was on a high lonely peak in northeast Georgia. I went to watch the great solar eclipse roll into action. This was in August 2017. It was a Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. and I took the day off from school to watch the eclipse because it is such a rare event. And I remember how the mountainside slowly darkened as the moon cast its shadow on the sun, and eventually the sun vanished. And that was the time when the mesmerizing notes of the Moonlight Sonata had come gushing into my head. And like at that moment, music and nature had been intertwined into one. And what is really interesting is at that time I thought that perhaps Beethoven was inspired to at least write the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata by this same spectacle. So it was quite funny for me when I found out that it was someone else's idea, but also I was really happy to see that people thought alike. So that the moonlight, really when the eclipse happened, it reminded a lot of the tunes of the Moonlight Sonata. And so I actually discovered the connection between music and the real world and its ability to impersonate nature when I was still a kid. At age 4, I had received a gift from my mom of Tchaikovsky's children's album and Schumann's album for the young. This was classical music CDs because she wanted to occupy me with something at that age, and I was still just learning to read at that time. And it was kind of a game for me to try to memorize all the names of the pieces in those children's albums. There was 22 pieces in one and 43 in the others, and there was like a piece of paper hanging on my wall with all the names of them listed. And I still remember some of those names from now, like Tchaikovsky's album had names like Winter Morning and Lark Song, and Schumann's album had names like Spring Song and Wild Horseman. And not only were those names reminiscent of nature, but also the tunes themselves really reminded me of certain scenes from the natural world. And I especially realized that now with all the hiking I've been doing. And then later, when I was around 7 or 8, I got more into listening to Beethoven and Chopin. And I was, in fact, around that age, I had already memorized every single one of the numbers of Beethoven's 32 sonatas. I was really entranced listening to the crashing battles I could imagine in his overtures because, like, when I was listening to that music, I could imagine a lot of different scenes. And the same went for Chopin, where I could imagine the different scenes of romance and tragedy and nature's beauty. And so at that time, the eloquent compositions of these geniuses brought richness to my soul, just like nature does today. And as I was standing in the total eclipse moonlight last year, that connection between music and nature was really revived. And I'll bring up another example in a second about that. But I wanted to say that over time, I slowly listened to music less because I got more busy with my nature-related work and with schoolwork and in general. And so my connection to music kind of faded over the past 5 or 6 years. I was actually taking voice lessons at one point with Ginger here, and I really enjoyed it. But again, eventually I stopped taking that and didn't have really time. And so, since I had not really listened to music much the past few years, I was quite nettled when my mother had made plans for me to go see the Andre Rieu concert in Orlando, Florida last November. Because that concert was on a weekend, it was on a Sunday, and so like a million negative thoughts flooded into my mind. First of all, I thought that the whole weekend would be without mountain hiking, because I try to hike every weekend. I really hate to skip it. And then I was wondering how in the world could the 900-mile round-trip drive to Florida be worth it just to hear that one concert. And even worse, the weekend before, I had managed to pour water onto my phone, and what that meant is that I would be without access to Facebook all weekend. What a pity that was. Well, there wasn't much that I could do about it anyway, and so we ended up still going. Like, I couldn't really stay behind at home by myself, and I remember that I was elbowing through the vast crowds in the Amway Arena, where Andrew Rue was performing on November 2nd with his Johann Strauss Orchestra. And as I settled into my seat, irritated and cramped by the tightness of the seat, I was still wondering why I had agreed to come there. But it turned out that it was a bit of a different experience than I imagined. In fact, I was surprised at how powerful the live music experience was, because I had listened to Andrei Rue sometimes on YouTube within the preceding couple of years, and I was not too impressed with that music. Like, I didn't really care for it. And so I realized kind of that the computer and YouTube and all those things made the experience pretty filtered in general. And I was surprised to realize how much different the live music experience was. And that really made my day that time. And so the thing is, I can't really go anywhere, even to Florida, without planning some sort of hike. And obviously, I used to think that Florida is really a boring place as far as hiking goes and nature, like it's just beaches and swamps and alligators. That's probably all there is. But I've actually hiked there over 70 trails since 2015. And now I have learned that it is one of the most biodiverse places in North America, which is incredible because of how flat it is. And so I planned out a hike I would do before the Andrew Rue concert. There was a convenient place right along I-75, about halfway down, called Big Shoals State Forest. It was one of the most unique natural areas in Florida because it had Class 3 rapids, which is unusual for Florida since it's so flat. And so I did that hike, and then I went to the concert that evening. And as I heard all the wonderful performance of the musicians in the Johann Strauss Orchestra that evening, in specific, it started with the Blue Danube Waltz. The scenes from my hike earlier that day had started coming back into my mind. For example, as I was listening to the Blue Danube Waltz, I was imagining the ripples of the Suwannee River as it was slowly lapping the shoreline, the sandy shoreline, like with small waves, kind of like ocean waves. And those waves aligned to me with the music as it was slowly agitating at times, then slowly calming down, and so on. And then, for example, the Roses of the South Waltz was another one that was performed by Andrei Rue that evening. And then the scene in my mind changed from the river to the woods around the river, the classic live oaks, and the palmetto understory, and the late afternoon sunlight streaming through. And it really seemed to me like the tune of the music reflected those scenes. And as I listened to the concert that evening, it was about 1.5 hours long, I felt that I had really become one with the music, which is the motto of the school. And it reminded me also of how I had felt when I was listening to Beethoven and Chopin when I was 7 or 8. And just one more example I'll bring up as far as the music and nature connection goes is the Tchaikovsky Seasons album, which he wrote a piece for every month of the year. Like, for example, like October, March, April, June, and October reminds you of the autumn leaves, and especially it's kind of a sad song, so kind of like the last leaves falling off the trees and the trees becoming bare as you listen to that. And the April song will remind you of the flowers coming up, and the June song really reminds you. It's kind of like powerful music, like a lot of fast tunes, and it reminds me of waterfalls and seeing creek scenes from the mountains. And speaking of which, sometimes I've thought about that piece when I go visit waterfalls across North Georgia. And as a matter of fact, just a bit off topic, but I created a waterfall database, and for all of North Georgia, every single waterfall, and I learned that there's 460 waterfalls in Georgia, which was really amazing considering that the neighboring states are much more known for waterfalls than Georgia is. And I discovered 5 of those myself, and that's a lot less than some other people have, like Greg Ford discovered around 50 waterfalls.
Thanks, Steve.
Possibly. But I discovered 5, so at least I can say I discovered something. And I discovered one I really loved. I named it Angelica Falls because I named it after my mother, who is the founder of the school and who instilled both the love for music in me and the love for nature in me since I was a kid. And after this event is over, like at the end of everything, I can talk about more. I can give some more waterfall suggestions and things if anyone is interested here. But for now, I won't take up time with that. And just to summarize, I wanted to say that both music and nature really enrich our lives and touch our hearts, and I think they're both a part of our deep inner being, and it is both, in my opinion, important for us to really immerse ourselves there more, like listen to good music more, especially live concerts, and get out into nature more. And for example, maybe if you were to ever head out into nature to see a waterfall or something, maybe next time you do that, you could think about what kind of music you could imagine in your head when you're seeing the woods or waterfall or whatever. Just something to think about. And I know we're gonna have, in a second coming up, Simran is going to sing this sunrise and sunset song, and maybe it will, as you listen to it, maybe it will remind you of the beautiful sunrises and sunsets. So thank you very much all for listening, and let me know if you'd like to give me any more. Let me know if you'd like me to give some hiking suggestions after the event is over.